Oh, you're attacking Ukraine. You, sir, do not get to watch the new Batman movie. The Western powers can't ideally hit Putin directly with weaponry. So they are hitting him with what they can: economic sanctions and attacks on the wealth of Russia. How does this affect the Russian people immediately? Are there places where the lines get a bit blurry with the economic sanctions? And most important of all, how did the world get to a place where the international community could deny commerce to a country and wreck the nation's economy? Let's start with the last question first. This Scottish gentleman is Adam Smith. He was a philosopher who's considered the father of economics. During Adam Smith's time, there was an idea that was very pervasive. It was an idea that you had to prioritize the goods of your own country and you had to put tariffs and extra taxes on products that were coming from a different country. So this meant that your products are always cheaper for the community and they end up making you the most wealth. Adam Smith disagreed. Adam Smith's point was any man should not be making something that he could buy for cheaper. For example, say you can make a radio yourself with $1,000, but if you can buy it off of a shop for $150, you should not be making it because you're clearly not better than the guy who can make the radios for cheaper. We already had an understanding of this concept on an individual level at the time because an accountant was doing his job and he was not exactly baking bread on a daily basis. So the accountant was not baking bread, the baker was not paving roads, and the guy paving roads was not doing accounting. They were all specializing in their own ways and exchanging value with the surplus that they create. Adam Smith took this concept to an international level of trade between nations. About 150 years after the death of Adam Smith, the Allied powers won over the Axis powers in World War II. The Allied powers believed in the idea of free trade. So now, after World War II, there was a new hegemonic power structure. And now the idea of free trade went from just having an intellectual win to becoming an on-ground reality. Treaties and economic agreements made for a more and more interconnected world. Yes, this did lock certain nations into a servile status of being raw material suppliers because the other nations were more advanced and could create more complicated products. But be that as it may, it created a lot of benefits. An interconnected world is a world where everyone wants to cooperate. And an interconnected world, for a lack of a better word, is a flatter world. The concept of a flatter world was discussed by Thomas Friedman in his book about globalization, The World is Flat. But Thomas Friedman's ideas didn't exactly age that well because Thomas Friedman had the idea of the McDonald's arches. So the McDonald's arches theory basically says that any two countries that have a McDonald's will not go to war with each other. This is because they were on such a complicated level of supply chain and interdependence, and they are such a mature economy that they have a McDonald's that going to war would just be detrimental to all parties involved. But now Russia is literally at war with Ukraine and both of them have McDonald's, so that's a little tricky. But a flatter world means a more interconnected world. In an interconnected world, your chips are made in South Korea, your technology and brand comes from America, and your phone itself is made in China. And this is just at the surface level. If you dug deeper into where the plastics come from or some of the materials that go into the chips come from, you'd have to go to places like Russia and some parts of Africa. So in a world that is this intricately interconnected, it is not to the benefit of anyone to go to war with a neighbor that is also part of this global web. So, free trade helps maintain peace. Correction, free trade in an ideal world helps maintain peace. But now, this happened.
Russian forces have moved 5 kilometers nearer to Kiev in the past.
Russia has moved its troops into Ukraine and has started one of the largest conflicts since World War II. Now, how is the international community going to use the existing framework to tame Russia before things get out of control? The first wave of attacks was focused on making life harder for Putin and his oligarchs who have benefited from his regime and who stand to benefit from any benefits he makes from the war in Ukraine. Then came the businesses, the mega corporations that have a significant amount of power because of the resources and channels of access that they control. But the companies that have condemned the Russian invasion are not all equal. They range from companies that make sugary drinks to companies that are vital and make medicines. When McDonalds, Pepsi, Coca-Cola and Starbucks pull out of Russia, it almost sounds like a favor done to them. Thank you for making us healthier. Horrible Russian accent. Be that as it may, these companies employ thousands of people. And not to mention all the money that Russian and international investors have put into setting up these operations. It also has an add-on effect of snatching away a part of global culture that seems to permeate the world. A sort of homogenized pop culture that just lingers across the globalized, rich, urbanized world with your green Starbucks logos and Marvel movies. Other companies that have stopped operations in Russia include the Swedish apparel maker H&M and the Swedish furniture maker that confuses everyone with their layouts, IKEA. IKEA, what in the world? And an even hollower threat comes from movie studios, which are postponing the release of some of their movies. Oh, you're attacking Ukraine. You, sir, do not get to watch the new Batman movie. The vampire guy is pretty awesome in it. Gritty. Yeah, whatever. The more serious problems come with what come next in the list. Apple and Samsung have both stopped shipments and manufacturing that they had in Russia. Important automakers Ford, Toyota and Volkswagen have all suspended their manufacturing operations in Russia. And given that Volkswagen is such a huge brand, this also relates to its other brands like Skoda, Audi, Porsche and Bentley. Aircraft makers have joined the bandwagon too. Boeing and Airbus, which control about 90% of the commercial aircraft production in the world, have stopped servicing and maintenance operations to Russian airlines. Given the power that both these companies together command, this is not exactly pleasant news for Russian aircraft. On top of this, Russia has been cut out of basic financial necessities like the use of Visa and MasterCard. This is where things get a little blurry. Russian infrastructure has been hit badly and the financial service operators are refusing to service Russia. This means that the people who are hit are the most common of Russians. Now, please hear me out. My point is not that the economic sanctions are bad. While I do not claim to know the historical efficacy and the hypothetical efficacy of such measures, here is what I do know. The economic sanctions brought upon Russia are not a bad thing after all, because the sooner Russia can be made to understand that this is not a game it could gain from, the farther away we can stop from the point of no return. And the financial service infrastructure at least is something that can be switched back on. But there are certain things where things get a little trickier, like pharmaceuticals, medicines. As of the time of making this video, pharma companies Johnson & Johnson, Bayer and AmerisourceBergen are still doing business with Russia. The medication is still being supplied and they are open for sale. Important cancer drugs are still on the shelves and people have access to this kind of medication. But the people who are on medication in Russia have already experienced a lot of trouble because of how much the ruble has deteriorated. The cost of medicine is already high. Now, while the medication is still available and the supplies are still on, attention is being brought to this fact. Attention is being brought to this fact with a slight nudge that maybe the medicines should be stopped too. Maybe they should also be part of the economic sanctions. Now, the economic life of the average Russian has been impacted by huge magnitudes since the war started. And it should, because the things Russia is doing in Ukraine is nothing short of horrific. We need things to turn around and become better. The economic sanctions are a good way of giving a telescopic view into a future where the international community does not cooperate with Russia. And as people who are watching this and as people whose fate is inextricably linked to this conflict ending amicably, we can only hope these swift sanctions work. And hope that the sanctions work swiftly enough. Swiftly enough because the economic sanctions should not last so long that they actually start impacting the Russian populace badly. So badly that the neutral Russian populace will start seeing enemies in the shadows of the West. And the last thing we want right now is a nation behind the actions of Putin cheering him on. I'll see you next time.